the mute button off. That so helps. Can you hear me? No, you can't hear me? Hello? 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 Okay. Oh my God, I look ridiculous. Because that's kind of how my life is going right now. I'm a unicorn. I'm going to add you to the stream, Cindy. I'm going to add you to the stream. All right. So say hello, guys.
Hey.
Hi.
Oh, I hear voices. That makes me sound crazy.
All right, let me recenter. There we go.
Okay, yeah. I think I can take this out now that I have the door closed. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
You're good.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm not going to be a unicorn. I discovered yesterday that I don't have like real grown-up headphones.
No, I don't either. I have my gaming headphones on.
Okay, I was like, I don't have headphones, so great. Thank you for joining me. I am so happy.
Thank you
I
for the
have my
invite.
water, which may or may not be water. Maybe it's something else. And then I have a glass of wine in the kitchen that I'll grab in a minute. But thank you both for joining. And I'm so excited that we were able to get together and this timing worked out and that my microphone is working. Can I just say how cool my microphone is? Okay, sorry.
What kind is it?
It's a Yeti microphone. It's a blue one, which I think are more rare.
Yeah.
But I found it and I was like, no, this is professional. All right. So welcome to the land of and. And so in the land of and, we are doing a little bit of everything. We are trying to have different roles, but really just make it more about having roles and being comfortable with them and figuring out what our voices are and how we want to show up. And so the land of and for me is being a full-time worker, professional, in addition to being a single mom and having 3 kids. And so my landscape right now, we've been in digital learning, distance learning for about 5 weeks. We're at the almost end of 5 weeks, and it's honestly driving me nuts. I spend so much time chasing my kids in to meetings, out of meetings, like chasing them to get back from breaks. And it's just not really, it's kind of miserable. let me just say it's kind of miserable. And so I'm like, there has to be another way and a better way. And so I started down the path of what the heck is this homeschooling thing that it seems so scary because it just does. Like, I don't know enough about it to really make it make sense yet. And so I wanted to ask questions, and I have a bunch of questions that I wrote down that I wanted to figure out if you guys could help me with. And I think that a lot of parents are in the same boat. They're like, we don't love digital learning, but it's the only option because they're not really aware of what the other pieces are. And so that's where you guys come in. I'm really excited to have this conversation because I feel like it's going to be a decision in the next 2 to 3 weeks, right? If the school doesn't get their act together, if the school is just going to let it be whatever it is, then I'm not necessarily okay with that. I'm not getting that much work done. I mean, don't tell anybody, but I'm not getting that much work done.
Sure you're not alone.
I'm chasing my kids around. My kids are miserable. Ellie, my youngest daughter, like she cries in the afternoon every other day because she doesn't want to be on the screen anymore. Like she's just done with it. And so like 2 o'clock is when I'm usually snuggling with her because I'm like comforting because she doesn't want, like she's just done with school. Carter has ADHD. And so trying to get him to focus for that many hours and sit in a chair still, more or less still, is miserable. And he's like over it. Olivia likes school, but if you don't call on her every hour, she gets mad. And so you can't necessarily be called on every hour because there's 28 other kids. And so she's just like sitting there pissed off. She's like, because the teacher is not paying attention to her and she can't because there's so many students. So I wanted to get a better understanding of what is homeschooling. Like a couple of questions that I have in mind is the process of how you get to do it. Like what do you have to do? Some other aspects that I just don't know is what are the main differences that you guys have experienced, and some more questions like that. But before I even get to those questions, I wanted to introduce you guys and also have you guys do an introduction yourselves. And we can start from there. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Sounds good? Okay, fantastic. And thank you guys for hanging in there as I'm putting together I feel like putting together my life. Like you are in the front seats of me trying to figure this out as I'm like, I don't think this is working.
Well, you're one step ahead of me. I've never done it. So I have no basis to criticize you.
I'm just like stressed out. And you know what I said the other day? I said like, it was Monday. And I was like, this is bullshit. Like, I cannot be this miserable all the time. And I'm like, it's just not okay for me to be miserable and the kid to be miserable. Like,
No.
come on, universe. I'm okay with having them be miserable. That's part of parenting, right? Like, that's fine by me.
Yeah.
But I'm not okay with everybody being miserable. That just seems excessive.
Right.
That's my take on it. So, Cindy, I've known you for how many years now?
I think we met when the girls were infants.
Right. Yeah. So 6 years.
Right.
Cindy has been like my strong mom friend that I've known, and she has so many answers that I never knew I had questions for. She's like, hey, if you do this, it will help you. And I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, wow, that was so amazing. I didn't even know I had that question. So she's like that person. And so long-standing homeschooler of 2 kids. JT is now in high school. 10th.
Yep.
10th. And so we are both located in Florida.
Right.
So I'll ask you some Florida questions around that as well. And every state's a bit different. And Will is
10.
10. I know these answers on a normal.
Same Carter's in 4th now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're the same grade.
Okay, that's what I thought, but
yeah,
I can't make any decisions for anything. I'm like, should I say that? Should I not say that? This is where the wine would come in. And Beverly, I met recently, about a month ago. Is it a month ago? I want to say it's a month ago.
Pretty close. Yeah.
And she's the only person that I've spoken to. So I went to this virtual conference for video influencers. And with this YouTube channel and me just really being committed to kind of growing this, I went to this virtual conference. And so you're able to, in the conference app, you're able to like talk to other folks and do a bit of networking. And so she was like the one person that I reached out to. I'm like, she seems normal.
That's great to hear.
She's not super intimidating and she seems smart. I'm like, those were my 3 criteria. Not intimidating, smart, and normal. Like that was my list of things. But you kind of shake your head, Beverly, but it's like nobody else passed that test.
Oh no.
They were either like, oh, I don't know, they don't seem like my kind of person, or they were just like, I don't know if I can get on board. So I was very particular in how many people I reached out to. That being said, I'm gonna read Beverly's LinkedIn profile pieces. Education consultant, experienced online instructor, homeschooling veteran, creative problem solver, and teacher counselor. So when I read that and I looked at her profile, I was like, oh, I like this woman. She's a good egg. I mean, I didn't know you, but I thought you were a good egg. So feel free to, Cindy, we'll go with you first. Feel free to share a bit about yourself, whatever you'd like to share.
Well, I have been homeschooling now for about 7 years. So prior to that, I did virtual school for about 3 years. So this is about my decade mark. Having my kids at home.
Sorry. I didn't know if I should cheer or not.
No, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. And I have my kids have a 6-year age gap, so I've been homeschooling Will since he was in pre-K, and then I've been homeschooling JT, or had him in some sort of virtual school since he was in the 1st grade. So they both had experience in real schools first. JT went to public school for a year. Will went to Montessori school for 3 years. So I don't have a blanket sort of approach to homeschooling because my kids are very different.
Yes.
So
Okay.
their needs are very different. So I kind of approach it from an individualistic point of view, and I do what's working for them at the time. So every year we would reevaluate what's working, what's not working. Do you want to go back to real school? Do you not want to go back to real school? And since I know I'm the parent, but they're going to have to make choices, big life choices from now on, after they leave the house. So I really want them to start thinking about what works for them and what doesn't work for them, and have a say in their education. So that's really the approach I've taken over the past decade.
Because you're awesome and you want your kids' input. I love
Yeah,
it. I asked Carter. I was like, we had a bit of a hard conversation on Monday, Carter and I. I said, because his homework that I've been seeing are like the worst assignments I've ever seen. Not because the teacher has bad assignments, but because his answers are garbage.
mm-hmm.
He did a book log, and it's like, what is the setting of the book? One question per day. It was like very simple. What is the story about? Name some characters, name the plot, like one question each day. And his answer of the setting was, it is good. I'm like, but what is the setting? He's like, Mom, I'm like, I know you know what it means when the question is, what is the setting? And I'm like, that's a dumb answer. And he's like, so I said to him, like, you're not even trying. Like, you're so frustrated with the environment that you're not even trying. You're just mad at everybody. And I'm like, you're going to have to get over that because you're going to have to go to school. There's not much that I really will be a hard line on, but I'm like, you can either go to school in this way. We can talk about homeschooling. Right. We can talk about doing just virtual school, and those are options. Those are the three options, right? Like a different Florida virtual school. And he's like, well, I want to be with the school that we're at now. I'm like, then you can't give me garbage answers, right? Like, you have to make an effort. So I gave him sort of I don't want to say ultimatum, because that sounds harsh, but it kind of was a harsh topic and time of conversation. I'm like, either you're going to have to get it together and like do this for real, even though it sucks, or we're doing homeschooling. Like, I don't know what else to do with you because you're not learning a damn thing. Right. So I'm like, at the sake of your education, I can't just have you doing nothing. And so he's like, okay. And then I was like, you're not getting your tablet and your electronics back until you figure it out. So that was the impetus of, okay, fine, right? Like, all right, Beverly, you're up. So
right.
Talk about you, because I'm still getting to know you and would love to hear some things.
Yeah, well, I'd love to hear Cindy. You know, my philosophy of education is very much like hers. So I started off as a public school teacher. I taught high school, and then I taught middle school for a couple of years. And then that was in California. And then we moved out to Kansas. And my 5-year-old was kind of precocious and was reading at a very early level, or a very early age. So I thought, you know, kindergarten, well, it might kind of slow her down because she's reading at a 4th grade level. So I had her tested by a child psychologist, and just to make sure that I wasn't inflating her progress, and I just want to make sure. So he said, oh yeah, she wouldn't fit into a public school or a traditional school environment. So here's some curriculum, start here, and we'll see, maybe skip her a grade or something when she's ready. And so I did that. And I had a 3-year-old at the time, so she went to preschool, and then I had a newborn. So I thought, I've got a newborn, so I might as well stay home and homeschool my 5-year-old. And then that year turned into the next year, like Cindy was saying. We just kind of took it year by year, and I ended up schooling them for 2 or 3 years. And then my son was a toddler, and he was also kind of precocious, and he was a handful. So I ended up putting the girls in public school. And they went to public school for 3 years. And we have great public schools where we're at in Kansas. I mean, some of the best in the nation. So it's a great school district that they're in. So I put them in there. But my one daughter, her test scores started going down every year. My other daughter was getting kind of bullied. She just asked to come home every year. So after 3 years, we brought them back home and continued to school them year by year. And the girls went all the way through to graduation, and now they're college graduates. And I'm a grandma now, so they're like 26 and 23. And then my son, we put into private school for about 5 years, and then we put him over into public school again. Great school district we're in, and he didn't really fit. We're all kind of creative and funky and different and non-traditional. And so in that environment, he really didn't thrive as much as maybe he could have. Not that he couldn't fit in and take the tests and do really well with it, but he just didn't want to play the game. And so part of me thinks, oh, maybe he would have done better at homeschooling, but no, he was so social. So he just, I think, overall didn't like school. So he went to college this last year. He lasted a semester. He's like, this is not what I want to do, and I'm not going into debt for it. So now he's kind of working right now and figuring out what his gifts and talents are and where he wants to put them out in the world to help people. But that's kind of like Cindy, we just took it year by year, and it worked. I'm glad I did it, but it was probably the hardest thing I ever did. And then the PhD is the second, but truly homeschooling was the hardest thing I'd ever done. It was hard.
Yeah.
I like the perspective that it's hard, but you did it, and you guys have stories to tell about it. So what are the big differences between homeschooling and digital learning? And so let me kind of give you a little bit more of a description of what the digital learning looks like. Right now, the county is following the exact same bell schedule as the in-person students. So they are required to be there and be on camera all day. They have 4-minute breaks. They get more breaks because the teachers are saying, if you need a break, feel free to go to the bathroom or whatever, right? But they're following this rigid schedule that starts at 7:50. You have specials. I have the calendar here. So you have specials. I'll share this out actually on the screen, but you have homeroom writing for 40 minutes. You have a 3-minute break, and then you have specials for 42 minutes, and then you have a 4-minute break. And so it's built out in this way where I'm like, every break they have between things, I'm going and chasing them back to go back. We have this clock on the wall, and I got the little watches because they were super excited to be grown up and have like a watch. So we did that, and they've gotten better at it. They've gotten better at going back to class, but they're 6 and 9. And so, Carter has ADHD. And so when he wanders off, he just wanders off. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, I'm just thinking. I'm like, okay, that's good. I like thinking. That's better than not thinking. So I'm like, are you supposed to be in class right now? Are you on break? He's like, yeah, I'm supposed to be there. I'm like, what are you doing? So there's been a bit of just chasing around. The teachers are overwhelmed because they have 40 students. One has 80 students. It's ridiculous.
Oh gosh.
Between the two teachers that are digital teachers in the 4th grade, they have a total of 80 students, and they switch. So they have just the same 2 topics, and then they do, the different blocking of I do math and science and whatever, and then you'll take that and I'll do the other, 40 students. So she has, the combined 2 teachers has 80 students. And so he's just struggling being in the seat. He's struggling with the interaction. He's kind of introverted until he gets more comfortable. And so when they do breakout sessions, it's not the best experience because he doesn't want to say anything wrong. And he doesn't know anybody, right? Everyone's just face value new. And then he's like, I don't want to talk to these. So there's a bit of shyness there. And so the experience has just been miserable. He's sitting for a long time. It's a half an hour break for lunch. And the highlight of the day is lunch. I mean, that might be the highlight of my day too, but that's the highlight of their day is okay, the girls get a bit of a different schedule. They have an hour for lunch instead. But the things that I've noticed with this homeschooling is that they go kind of slow, where the lessons that they're teaching are valuable lessons, right? But they take 45 minutes to teach. Not that much. And so I start to wonder as a parent, I'm like, could I do this more efficiently if I taught them? And could I do this differently in a shorter time frame instead of 6.5 hours where they're actually working or they're doing school technically? And that's where I wanted to get into of what are the big differences between homeschooling and this digital learning environment right now?
Well, I know from my experience with virtual school, it's somewhat similar. I had JT in one or the other of the virtual schools that are available here in Florida for first, second, and third, and we got to fourth, and I yanked him because it was not working out. I had him in one virtual school for first and for second grade, and there wasn't nearly the same teacher interaction, but it was all day in front of a screen, which got tedious for me and for him because at the time I had an infant, so that was tough. I left that particular virtual school after the second grade because many of the slides and things, because there's no textbooks, you're working strictly off of whatever they have on screen in front of you. A lot of the slides and information were exactly duplicated in second grade that was there in first grade. And I thought, this is not okay. And since I was doing most of the work anyway, because there was one class a week with a teacher, and it was for about an hour, and it alternated. So it was reading one week and then math one week and then reading one week and then math one week. And that's it. So I was doing all the work anyway. So that, that was kind of my first step towards ditching the virtual school, because if I was already doing all the work, why not just go all the way? But, it is a scary thought process when you're making the jump to homeschool, for me anyway, because I'm like, oh my God, what if I ruin their future? What if I don't do this well enough? It was a scary thing that I kind of had to talk myself into over time.
Yeah, it's definitely a scary thing because I'm like, I don't know, I was working on relative pronouns with Carter on his worksheet, and I'm like, I don't even know the rules for this. I looked it up. I had to go back to his reference document, and I'm like, relative pronouns, yes, that's what it is. I'm like, I don't know. This is only fourth grade in the beginning of the school year, so I can only imagine like what else there is that I don't remember. I think that's a nervous part of this is like, the girls are fine. They're in first grade. I get first grade. I'm okay with that content. But fourth grade is a whole other world. And what if I ruin their education? And then I have wine and I'm fine. But, like in that other time during the day when I'm not having the wine, there's a nervousness.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, oh. And then what if I'm busy at work one week and I don't have the ability to really do those lessons? And then what if I explain it to him and he doesn't get it because I don't get it? And then he asks a hard question and I don't know the answer. Like, I don't know. So, Beverly, we'd love to hear your thoughts on how you navigated this of like this fear aspect.
Yeah, fear is a huge thing because homeschooling in some ways is natural because you know your kids better than anyone else. So it's natural, and you want your kids to do well. So I understand that feeling too. Even though I was a professional educator, I didn't teach elementary school. So trying to be like this teacher who knew it all, and I was going to help my kids at whatever grade, I had to kind of like step back and learn it again. So it was almost like I was 1 week ahead of them sometimes. And it was okay. I picked a program for mathematics because that was where I struggled. I was an English teacher. So I struggled with math as a kid growing up. So I picked a program that I would respond to and that I could learn rather quickly so that I could teach them. So I kind of at the very young.
I love what you said just there about you were 1 week ahead.
It was.
That makes me feel like really good.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, so I don't have to like relearn the whole year's content.
No, not at all. And I was kind of honest with my kids from the start. I literally, in just how I teach, even professionally, when I taught at the University of Kansas, my 18, 19, 20-year-olds, I would say to them, I don't know everything. This is a new course for me. When I started teaching the education course for the first time, I said, hey, this is my first time. In fact, it's my first time teaching online in a hybrid. I don't know what I'm doing, but let's figure it out together. How many of you have done a hybrid? So I kind of just took, and half of them had done a hybrid course. Half of them had never done online. So we kind of were in it together. And I did that with my own kids. I'm like, you know what? Homeschooling is kind of different. We're going against the grain. So I don't know everything, but you know what? We have the internet. So you have the internet. So how can you not homeschool your kids?
What about curriculums, and what about like, so structured in a school environment? At least even digital learning, you have the curriculum built for you. You're as a parent responsible for like what you're teaching, which could be totally easy because I get some workbooks and like it'll be a good time. But what about the other things that I think they should know, like STEM stuff or like all the other stuff that's not as obvious? Like math, I think I would be okay with. First grade math's pretty awesome. I can do fourth grade math, I'm pretty sure. I haven't tried it, but I'm pretty sure that I can. But what, and all these like details of what you're supposed to teach.
Well, that matters. Like, are you wanting to teach what the school system says you're supposed to teach? Or are you wanting to teach in terms of just teaching your kids how to learn and wanting them to have that philosophy of learning forever?
I don't know. Because I'm not sure if I do the homeschooling thing, and what if I'm like, I don't know that I want to do this homeschooling thing forever. So if I take them out, right, and you write a letter and you're saying, I'm owning this, I'm putting them in homeschooling, I got it. And then I do it for a year and we survive and it's okay.
That's fine.
And then we put them back in, like, what if they're behind? What if I didn't use the standards for the school and now they don't know how to do moldy bread experiments? Like, I don't know. That's the current experiment they're working on, which is disgusting and it's in my house. But what about like that? What if they miss things, right? That's another concern of mine, is that what if they miss things? And it's my responsibility to make sure they don't miss things. And I'm the teacher and the curriculum builder, researcher, because I'm very conscious of being able to put them back. Like, I don't want to keep all of the ownership all the time. I want to give them back at some point.
Right. I would say that even in a brick and mortar situation, they're not learning everything. So take that off of your plate.
What do you mean
and I mean, that's what Common Core, when that was introduced, that was what was supposed to happen, where all the states were on the same page about what kids were supposed to learn at a certain level. But from school to school, it's still different. From teacher to teacher, it's still different. Kids have different learning styles. Teachers have different teaching styles. So, you don't have to know everything and you don't have to teach everything.
You can't.
No, it's impossible.
That's, I think, the big fear for me of going against the grain, of taking them out. Even though it is more accepted now that we're in this COVID situation, it's taking them out and just having that full responsibility. And not, like, I'm okay with not knowing what I'm doing to a certain degree because I look things up. But in terms of like curriculum, the bigger sort of structural pieces, I worry about. I'm like, oh, well, what if I'm not teaching the math at the level that, well, math is easier. English at the level that they're going to need for fifth grade, or actually, you know what? I'd be okay because they'll be able to write things, and I think I'll be okay. See, that's like a therapy session. What else are your fears, Joanne? Let me tell you what I'm worried about.
The fears never go away either.
No.
I hate to tell you that.
That's some real talk, and I appreciate that. Like, you're still going to be nervous when you do this, and it's going to be okay. What other considerations did you guys go through when you thought about switching or not switching as you went through this year to year?
You know, I thought when we brought them back home, they were like 6th grade and 4th grade. And I have to say that my middle child had made some friends, and she really kind of didn't want to come back home. She would have been fine staying in public school. And even to this day,
Okay.
so socialization, even to this day, she has difficulty making friends. And sometimes she says, oh, you know, I wish I could have gone to school and had the typical teenage experience. But at the same time, she says, I don't regret homeschooling. So it's so hard to know what life would have been like had I chose a different path for her. But she could have gone into education, and her grades, she was dyslexic, so her grades could have just suffered. She could have been on a whole different track and had some self-esteem issues, which she did too, because socialization anyway. Not that homeschool kids don't have self-esteem. You know, she's had to struggle with that and anxiety. She's an extreme introvert, but she has self-awareness. She knows, she puts herself in situations now as an adult to be around a lot of people every day as her work of choice, so that she doesn't get into her introvert world. But, you know, you make choices, and that's part of homeschooling. And I think that is socialization is a consideration. However, we can't see the future. We can't see the other path. And perhaps she would have gone the other way and fallen into worse situation with friends or social media or whatever. And being a homeschooler, I could control that social media for a long time. I controlled it. Technology, I'm a big tech advocate. I mean, I love technology, and I do social media and all that, but I was very slow to introduce technology. So, you know, and I homeschooled from 2000 to 2015. So the iPhone didn't even come out till 2007. And we got them first, and then our kids watched us. And then my girls were 17 and 16 before they got a phone. And then my son, we held off with my son until 14. And so we're like, yes, personal victory, because they don't need a smartphone. Kids don't need a smartphone until maybe they're 14 or 15. And by then in middle school, they should have already been taught in public schools and homeschools how to use the internet, how to use a smartphone, why we need filters, why it's addictive, why, you know, so that's like my background now. That's my shift in the future, is to teach that self-awareness. And I did that for my kids, and they'll say, yeah, Mom, you harped on us with technology, because that's our world now. And so I think that's something to think about. The socialization now with homeschoolers is different than with my kids. So now they're on social media at about middle school, 9th grade for sure. And they are making friends that they've never seen before. Like we are. We're making friends that we've not in person ever see, but we're close to, and it's like we're friends. And we are, but it's just, you know, all over the world. And it's incredible. And I think it's wonderful. And my kids now have made friends, my girls on Tumblr and their social media of choice, where they feel heard and they feel connected. That's something to think about, socialization. I don't know if I kind of went off your question, but that's definitely something
I think it was a great answer, because socialization is, I think, the original reason why I kept him in school, and because of working. And that's like the norm or whatever. And so this year, they don't have that socialization like you would normally. So the benefit is not as strong. And because Carter and Ellie are more shy, and they're a little more introverted with new situations, they're not getting a ton of socialization. They'll have breakout rooms. And funny story today about the breakout rooms, the girls are in the same class, and so they went into a breakout room yesterday, had a great time, met new friend Kennedy, and I heard about her for the rest of the day. Heard all about their new friend, and I'm sitting right there, so I'm like, you don't need to tell me this, but they were anyway. And then today, they're like, oh my God, we're gonna do breakout rooms, we're so excited. And just by the luck of the draw, they ended up in a breakout room with each other and nobody else. And they were so mad. They're like, Mom, I don't want to talk to Ellie. Like, she's like, I want someone new. And it was, her anger was kind of funny because she was so pissed off. She was so upset. So it's like, it's different. This year of socialization is not what we've normally seen. And is it worth it just for that small amount of socialization? I don't think so. Like, I'm not putting them into the school because of that aspect, at least not for this year. It's more for the curriculum, for the active teaching with teachers. I think those are the two main reasons why they're in the school that they're in right now. But homeschooling has been a topic even prior to this year because of you, Cindy, because, you know, Carter and Will are friends, and Carter's like, well, Will goes to bed really late. Like, Carter's bedtime is like 8:39. And like, Will doesn't go to bed at 9. I'm like, but they're on a homeschool schedule, in a whole different schedule. Like, they control, you know, different aspects. And then he's like, well, I want to be on a homeschool schedule. And I'm like, yes. I'm like, that's a nice aspect of it. I'm like, but then you don't have any other people. And he's like, I don't care. I'll have Will. And I'm like, this is a losing conversation. So he loves Will that much. Like, he was willing to give up all his other friends from 3rd grade to be like in this group with Will, which I thought was, I'm like, Cindy, they're more about this homeschooling thing.
Yeah,
So,
no, they're tight.
He called him like 6 times and he goes, she's not answering. I'm like, I don't even think he's awake yet. Like, leave him alone. What resources for curriculum are out there? I think it's one of the things that I'm not real. I know there's a couple of books that Cindy, you had sent me, and I will put them in the description for folks that are looking for those. And I've seen a couple that are, there's so many different ones. There's Christian-based ones. There's like all sorts of different options. Do you guys have a preference, or how did you approach this?
Well, for me, I knew that I didn't want to try to come up with a complete curriculum on my own. So at first I looked for a program where the curriculum was already kind of laid out for me. And so I would receive all my teacher materials, and every day it laid out exactly what needed to be accomplished. And so I taught the pieces that I needed to teach. And then the rest of the time, my kids would just work independently. And it was reinforcing things that I had either taught, or maybe it was brushing up on skills that they needed to go over, or, you know.
And how much time did you spend doing the teaching every day, or ever? So daily, just about how much time would you say that?
So I found it was easier for me to do a little bit of schooling 7 days a week and make the days shorter. And because, you know, Will is, especially with the autism spectrum, that can be very challenging. So I really have to think about every year what is working for him, because being able to sit still for a long time, sitting at a screen for a long time, material choice is very important. It's challenging. I'm not gonna lie, but it's worth it, I think, because he can get up and move around as much as he wants. If he needs to talk to me as he's walking, or as he's outside running around in a circle, that's fine for him. And that's not something that I could provide him with if he was in a regular school environment. But it was too intimidating for me to start out, you know, with no support system and just start picking curriculums, pieces. So I went with a structured program at first, which was great for us.
I think that's the route I would likely take. I would do something of a structured program and sort of match it to, I think, whatever the school that they're currently in is doing, so that kind of matches up.
Right.
I was going to ask, what are your thoughts on that, Beverly?
Okay, you skipped out on that one, but are you talking to me now?
Yes. My question was, what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so I don't know if it was the educator in me or not, but I just wanted to create my own curriculum. And like Cindy, I look at students as individuals as well. Every student is unique. Every human being is unique. So that education background that I had and that learner in me wanted to figure out a curriculum that's best for them. So investing that money in my first kid, because I knew she was hitting the ground running. I don't know how to deal with kids like this. She's very precocious. She was asking questions. I have no idea. You were saying, like, how do I answer these questions? So taking her and having her tested worked for me because he gave me the curriculum. So he introduced me to all kinds of curriculum, like for reading and vocabulary and writing. And
Interesting.
yeah, so I kind of went with his recommendations for the basic drill and kill is what we call it in schools, where the kids hate it. And they hated it, but I still did it because it kept up with the school, with vocabulary that they'll need for the ACT or SAT. It starts like in second grade, third grade, right? But then I used a book called The Well-Trained Mind.
Yeah, that's me too.
Oh, okay.
The one that you just...
And I just sent it to Joanne.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
I think pictures of it too. So
perfect. And that is, it is a structured, they give you structured. They're amazing. She and her mom. Whoa. I met her at a conference. So you can't go wrong with a book. And Joanne, I know I've talked to you enough to know that you're creative. And if you feel comfortable with, and like Cindy, taking it year by year and being very forgiving, like if something doesn't work, oh, well, we'll try something new the next year. But every year you're still going to be learning. You're not robbing your kids of an education if you chose a curriculum that didn't work. They know it didn't work. You know it didn't work. You're all on the same team. You don't have to like, we're doing this curriculum. No, we'll just we'll reassess at the semester or the year. And that's the fun of homeschooling. It's just messy sometimes. There's no perfect curriculum, but I liked the freedom of the well-trained mind because they gave you so many suggestions, and it's the trivium model, which is, the grammar stage, the logic stage, and the rhetoric stage. So it worked for me.
I mean, if you two are recommending this book, then clearly it's the right book to use, right?
It can be overwhelming, though. It's not, maybe it will work for you if your philosophy lines up with mine or Cindy's. There's some, you'll find that there's all different homeschooling teachers. And I studied homeschoolers. So I've studied homeschoolers. My dissertation was in homeschoolers and technology and how they integrate technology for their homeschooling. And I've noticed in talking to like 1,000 home educators over the 15 years that I homeschooled my kids in conference after conference that I've attended, they're all different. There's no typical homeschooling mom. They're all different.
Well,
and so the curriculum's different.
Part for me is that, so I would be doing the homeschooling, but I would still be working full time. That's the other caveat, right? Because it's not like I'm going to not work, because I can't not work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a single mom, right? So then I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, I could homeschool from like 7:30 to 8:30 before my workday starts. I will take an hour break for lunch. We'll eat and then go over the assignments that I had for independent study. And then from there, if we need you from 4:30 to 5:30 before dinner, or even during dinner, I can do a follow-up lesson or whatever. So that's the other part that's a little bit awkward, is that I'm doing it in between work. That I'm not chasing them, right, to do whatever, that we have dedicated special time for this part of it. But then I'm like, well, can I do it for 2 different grades? Because if I'm starting off at 7:30 with Carter, the girls are, so I'm like, how do I make this logistically work? And can I? And then the other part of it is, did you have other people help with topics? Because I hear about homeschooling pods, where you kind of get with a few other families, and then whoever has specialties, you trade off, essentially. And so I'm like, maybe I could do that with other working parents, and that they could be a part of the curriculum and educator panel or pool of folks. It's not just me. Because that's the other big hesitation I have, is that I'm going to be taking it on in terms of responsibility all on my own. Maybe their dad will do some pieces, but I'm not going to rely on that completely. And so any thoughts or words of advice, I'm happy to, I'm all ears.
I didn't rely on any sort of pod. or like a collective. That was not something that I particularly got into. I know lots of people do it. It wasn't something that came up for us. We would do, our school day, and then the kids would go off to do whatever XYZ activity that they were into. Or it was swim class, or they'd go to this club or that club. So there were times where I would have a friend in a field that I would reach out to them and say, do you have any advice for this or that or the other? But it wasn't a regular thing for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that we had community, like co-ops that we would join to do like book club or something, but it wasn't, I was still very much in control of like teaching, like teacher. I tried not to make it look like traditional school, but I definitely, because I was so unorganized before choosing to homeschool, I really was. And I had to write that lesson plan out. Even in the state of Kansas, there's no homeschooling laws. We're so free here. And I know it's not like that in every state. But I'm just like, I registered our school. I just decided to name it Veritas Academy. So you had to give it a name. I'm a private, unaccredited school. That's kind of how my title. But I would make a lesson plan and I would give it to them. So that if, like you were saying, you have to work. So if I got pulled away for something, they knew what they were supposed to do at this time. So you got your kids the watch. They know at 10:30 they should be doing reading. So, you can redirect your kids to say, what are you doing at 10:30? Because you've already thought ahead. And that little bit of organization, it helps so much because it kind of put the responsibility on them. I don't have all the answers all the time. I'm not responsible really for their learning. I can teach them and give them materials to learn, but they're learning. They're responsible for your learning.
Oh,
and that's
I'm a big fan of that mentality. I'm like, your education, Carter, is your job. Like, that's your thing. It's not my responsibility. I will bring you to the school. I will get you the books. I will get you the uniforms, but if you decide that you just don't want to learn anymore and you want to, fourth grade education is not for you, that's on you. Like, I don't know, like I've reached my peak. I'm done. Third grade was great. I'm over it. So I've told him many a times, and we've had that conversation. I say the same thing to my girls. So I like that idea of having a general outline of a schedule and what their responsibilities are. And I love the organization.
But but doing that, knowing that you're wanting them to be active participants in their learning, again, that's my philosophy of education. I'm showing my little philosophy side, but saying that you have to continue that philosophy all through. So for example, my 14-year-old, when she was my oldest, she's like, you know what, Mom, I want to be an ornithologist.
I don't even know what that is.
I'm like going to Google, what is an ornithologist? Okay, she wants to be like a bird scientist. Okay, so ornithology is the study of birds.
Okay.
So she loves birds. We have a ton of birds here in Kansas. So, okay. So where do we find out about birds? So there is a society at Cornell University, and they have a course at Cornell on ornithology. And I'm like, all right.
Wow.
So I got a homeschooler. She's 14. She wants to take ornithology her first year of science instead of biology or chemistry or whatever for her biology or life science, whatever. I'm like, okay, we're going to take a class at Cornell, a home study class. And we got the book, and it was 8 pounds. It was like this thick. It was 8 pounds. It was a bowling ball. And she did it. So I watched her do it. She took notes. She did sketches. She was responsible for her learning. And I was there going, oh my gosh. She had to mail in tests, and she ended up with a B in the course. So of course I'm like, as an educator, that's an AP course. You get an A for the course. If you're going to get a B at Cornell. So, that philosophy of, if you really want your kids to own their learning, you have to continually support that. You know what? You own your learning. And so when my son was in public school, you own your learning. And when I got that letter in the mail, that certified letter in the mail his senior year that said, your son's in danger of not graduating, I'm like, oh, I just took it, not a reflection of me, but again, you're responsible for your learning, not your teacher, not me as a parent. Every kid is different. It's totally individual, and it's your philosophy. So if you have a philosophy, because you might find, Joanne, that your twins or that your son loves homeschooling, but your twins are like, nah, we want to go to public school. So are you going to have that same philosophy, whether you're in public school or private school or homeschool, that you believe in the individual and that they can teach themselves how to learn? That goes a long way.
That's the camp that I sit in, is that it's I will provide the support, I will provide the literal vehicle to get there. I will provide materials, and if you have questions, you don't know the answers, I'm here to.
Okay, that's like a homeschooler, Joanne. You're sounding like a homeschooler.
Like, I'm here to do all of those things because maybe they don't know, but ultimately it's not my response. Like, your education is your responsibility. I'm accountable that you do something, but like I will help with curriculum, but it's not. And I think it took me some time to get to this mentality, though, because I used to feel that I was a bad mom when they didn't get good grades. So I'm like, I'm a terrible mom. I didn't make you get it till you got an A. I didn't make you do it 6 times. And I'm like, at this point, like, it's on you, Carter. Like, now that you have this like realization that digital learning is not going away, if you don't want to do the work, why is that? Like, let's talk about that. But if it's because you just don't feel like it, like, that's not okay. That's on you, right? So if it's because you're having difficulties or whatever it may be, like, I can help with those things. You're feeling not focused enough because of ADHD. You're not on meds. Like, those things we can talk about. But it's because you're just being lazy. Like, I can't help with you're lazy, right? So that's something that I've adopted since Carter was in 2nd grade, I think. Where I was, because I had like a break where I was like, oh my God, he didn't get, and it's like, I think 2nd grade was the first year they got actual grades. It wasn't like S or O for satisfactory or not. And so, I don't know, I'm also Asian, so you gotta get all A's, and that's just how I think. And so when he didn't, and he got like a B and a C one semester, I was like, I'm a terrible mother. And so it took me that school year to get over it. I'm like, okay, no, like, I didn't, like, no. But yeah, that's my mentality. So as we're closing up here, any last wise words that you want to share for anybody thinking about going on this homeschooling journey?
Beverly?
Well, I was looking at my notes. I would say you have to feel it. You have to feel it in your gut. You have to have a strong conviction to do it. It's not enough to just, oh, I'm feeling courageous, I'm going to listen to my kid who says, oh, I think I can do homeschooling, and just see if we can go off and do it. No. You have to feel it in your gut that it's the best thing for your kids right now, like this year, because it's year by year. Like Cindy said, it's year by year. It's a marathon. And I never knew if I would finish all the way, ever, never. And if you are considering it, and especially COVID, they call themselves COVID homeschoolers, as I'm seeing on Facebook. My heart just goes out to them because, good for them. If they just know that something's not right digitally and the Zoom's not working and their kids are in tears and they're in tears and it's been 4 weeks, stop the madness. Okay, stop. And if you can do as good as if you think in your gut you can do as good a job as the public school could do this year, or maybe
that's not a real bar.
Maybe better, right? I mean, and get your kids away from the screen. As much as I love technology, I'm a slow introducer. Kids up until they're like 10, they get like 3 hours a week. I mean, my kids did. It was very regulated. So when I see these 6th graders that are, or 6-year-olds, like your daughter's supposed to type their answers on the screen when they never had to do that before, that's ridiculous. So, you're wise, you're a parent, your kids, look what's going on in schools today. And if you're just saying, this is not for me, I just feel in my gut, this is not right, maybe this is the year you try homeschooling.
Right. Yeah. Come on, Cindy, what words you got for me? What wise?
I mean,
girl?
I would say it is, at least initially, it can be very intimidating. And there is a part of that does crop up from time to time for me, where, I wonder, am I doing the right thing? But ultimately, when something is not working for your kids and something is not working for maybe your family as a whole. And when you get those feelings that something is not right, then it's time to make a change. So I would say that even though there's some initial fear about maybe jumping into the homeschooling arena, those fears are usually dissipate fairly quickly, because everybody gets into a rhythm. You start using materials that the kids gravitate towards. The kids start learning things that they're actually interested in, and where you might be in a position where you feel like you're taking on a lot, and the kids are also taking on a lot, but they are at the point in a homeschooling environment anyway where there's more of an interest, because there's more ownership, as opposed to when they're in a regular school environment.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you both for joining me. If you could hear my dogs and my kids coming in, they're like, "Where's dinner, Mom?" I'm like, "I'm doing something important for your education." They didn't care about that though. But thank you both for taking the time out of your day and being on camera with me, and all the wise words you gave and resources for myself and other parents that are in a struggling time at the moment. And maybe it'll get worse before it gets better.
Oh, I hope not. I hope
not.
not.
All of you. But I do want to say thank you so much for your time today and your just being you guys.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for having us.
Yay. Thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.